initial size I think is going to be about 80 and 70 because we don't want to expand as quick. Okay, so there we have these two expanding. One's going to frag it, or sorry, yeah, essentially activate it. The other one's going to frag it. And I just also realized that we've got two separate spheres being generated. Technically that's fine. All that's happening is because we did per call, some of the, essentially this is piercing through and it's detecting twice. So we just need to be careful about the activator, sorry, the intersector when it actually hits. But I mean, this is fine for what we're doing. So this is rad expansion, and again, I'm just going to tidy this up just slightly. Just trying to keep these close to each other so it just kind of makes a bit more sense. All right. So now comes the fun part. We've done a lot considering the fact that right now, we've just gone and built this complete system that isn't really doing much yet. But now it's about to start. Now that we've done all this front end work, we're able to get this to break pretty much anything we want. So the next step is we actually want this to activate everything. So that will be the next thing here. I want it to break apart all the floors and everything. So I'm going to say rad activator, and I'm going to do like a ppass AB. And we'll just do it for the roof for now, and then we can worry about everything else. So for now, I'm just going to pull in that activator, and then I'm going to pull in the roof. So where are we? It's the roof. Okay, and so now with the roof there, next step's going to be, I just want to double check, yeah, it's correct, so the roof. Alright, so next step, what I want to do is simply just do another in mesh, just like we've done before with the laser beam. I'm going to do an in mesh, and we're going to tell it to go a new group. So we're kind of shuffling things around a lot. The new group, however, I'm going to send it into one of these volume breaker groups here. So let's start to name these, that way they correspond a bit better. I'm going to create a bunch of groups, and the first one I'm just simply going to call B1, 1, and then we'll call this roof. And then floors, pillars, and walls. Okay, and let's just copy paste the color that we set up, so green, just so we know that these work. We're going to paste the green color on all of these. Okay, and almost done. All right, so the whole point is that we can have this in mesh, and I can get the position from which were they? It was the activator. So the activator would be the mesh, and the position would be the roof. Yeah, actually that's correct. So I have to think about that for a second. So we're going to plug this into the roof. We're going to tell it to go into the roof B1. We'll tell it to turn on. All right, so let's see if this works. These should turn green. So we get a laser fires down, creates a sphere that expands. All right, so something's gone wrong. I just got to double check this. But basically at this point, yeah, that's what should be happening. So I think that's fine. I think it's basically that the fact that the sphere hasn't been created yet. So we might need to give it a little bit of time. So if I did a particle age, and we set this to be relative, we set it to like 2, and then like a long time. we can plug that in as well into when the sphere gets created, okay? So when the activator gets created. So we would just simply need to go and put an AND. So we need to meet these two conditions, that when the sphere particle age reaches 2 and it's inside the mesh, then it's going to turn true. Alright, so that's working. Now what's happening is as this sphere expands, it's beginning to activate all of these bits of the roof, and they're all turning green. So we can see this a bit better. Let's go back to our fragger and activator. We don't need to show the shape. We can turn that off and instead change the display to bounding box. Same thing with activator. Turn off the shape and change this to bounding box. So by doing this, I'm going to do it to bounding box. Bounding box. So hopefully this should display. Alright, so I think what we're going to do is go to master dynamic. I guess I haven't done this yet. We just need to turn force setting off, and that means we can have custom display properties. So just master dynamic force setting, and now they're displaying as they should, which is the bounding box. Okay, so this just makes it easier because now we have like these, when it goes to 120, it's now going to have these boxes representing the bounding box. Okay, and this is just handy. We can see it's now activating over time, and we can control the time, we can control the radius, we can do all that stuff. And it's activating all of that. So we can do this, and we'll just tidy it up again. I'm just double clicking, which compacts it all down. I'm gonna hold, let's rename this and just call this roof. I'm gonna hold Control Shift, duplicate this a couple times. I'm doing it for pillars as well, but we don't, really need the pillars. I'm gonna say walls. Just so that way, if we ever did turn on something like that, it would instantly work. All right, so floors. Okay, so I need to go and set these up now. So this will be floor. I'm just going to turn TP off. I know it's not doing anything, but just display wise. So pillars. Lastly, walls, and we just need to tell where they're going now as well. So I'm going to tell this to go into walls, pillars, and then floor. Okay, so by doing all of that, now when we go to frame 120, anything inside the building, it's all going to activate. Okay, so now it's a little bit slow because it's activating all of these different groups. It's going to send them to a new group. So bit by bit, it's kind of going through this process. Okay, so we got all that working, and so now, it's been a long process, but we're at a point now where we can start to break it all apart. Okay, so let's have some fun. Let's start to break this stuff apart. I'm going to create another one here. Let's just call this VB for volume breaker. All right, and let's simply just break this stuff up. So I'm just going to go in and get the roof, and let's duplicate this stuff. So I'm just going to hold Shift, duplicate all of these groups. And I just want to change, I just want to change these to 2, representing that they're in the second group, the VB2. Now the whole idea, and by the way, I just want to make these the corresponding colors, so blue. But the whole idea is that we'll now activate these, and then we'll tell them to bit by bit begin to break down. Okay, so I'm simply just going to drop in a volume breaker, link it up. So this is going to go into the roof. It's going to connect the two, and all we're going to do is we're going to send this to the new group, which will be the roof, but we're not going to activate all of them right away. We can do that over time. So we can set this to 22, something like that. And it means that 22% of them will be activated as soon as they turn on. So you'll probably see some of these start to turn blue. You can see it a little bit already because they're already activated. But we can also then tell it to grow over time. So I can set the spreading size and the timing a little bit. And that just means that over time, more and more will activate. So in other words, these pieces will begin to break, but then they'll continue to break down over time. And let's just give these like 3500 density, 35 raster. So the higher the points, the more cuts, whereas the raster, the lower the value, the more detailed cuts it's going to get. Think of density as shitty cuts and raster as good quality cuts, but these take longer to calculate. So by doing that, I'm just going to jump ahead 9 frames after it activates. And we can start to see it's beginning a little bit. Let's go ahead a little bit more. All right, so we can see that there's stuff happening there. And we'll work on this more, but let's just set this up for the others as well. So I'm just going to duplicate. I'm not going to worry about the pillars. I'm just going to do the floors. And the walls. Finally, let's actually make these go up in the air. Okay, so we're at that point. I'm just going to call this forces, and this is where we can actually start to make these all raise up into the air. Right now, we're actually not using this red guy. What is it, the fragger or the activator? The fragger. So originally, I was going to get the activator, the spread out, and then we'd use the fragger to break everything, or vice versa. For now, I'm not going to use it, but I probably will come back and use it later. So it means that we'd have more control to set areas to break, and then this could come in and actually activate them. Like if we really wanted to, we could actually set something like that up, where we'd have like a threshold, like here or something to generate that. So there's definitely options if we want to use them. But for now, I'll just kind of keep it pretty straightforward. So one thing we haven't done yet is I'm just going to go into the create panel, space warps, forces, wind, and I'm just going to drop down 3 winds. The first one is going to be, if I can spell, directional, and then the next one's going to be turb big, and the next one will be turb small. And the whole idea will be that one of these can be directional, it can be wind pushing everything up, and then we could have one that's more smaller, higher frequency turbulence. So let's go in the modify panel, turb small, set the strength to 0. We'll give this, I don't know, like a bit of turbulence. I'm always setting my frequency to 2, and then the scale to 0.1. So it'll be relatively high frequency. Now the next one, turb big, same thing, strength to 0. We'll set this to be like a little bit higher, but 0.07 scale, so it's a bit bigger. Finally, we have the wind, the directional wind. Now this is something where I would want this not to have any turbulence. It would purely be to, I don't know, let's say 0.16, do something where it'll go up in the air. The big thing for this to work, I actually need to bind all of them. So we go like bind a space warp, drag it onto TP. Now this is pretty old school. I don't know why we still have to do this. This is like back in 3D Studio legacy particles. Like you would need to bind it for it to work. But once we've done that, we can go into forces, and we could get, we can individually control these, I guess. So like, what if we initially get the VB1 group, and we go and get a standard force, link this up, and this can be full force, okay? So we just activate all three, and then when this begins to break and do its thing, it's also going to have all of this being applied. So finally now, we're going to start to see particles raising up into the air. You can start to see them moving around. I'll switch to shaded viewport in a second. Okay, so we can start to see they're raising up in the air. We can make this a bit more interesting. Let's give it some velocity, and I know I'm doing this quick. That was under standard velocity, then dynamics, spin. And all I would want to do is give it some initial velocity, initial spin. So let's just vary the spin and set it based on direction. Link it up, and same thing with the velocity. The velocity, I don't know, like we'll keep it pretty basic. I'm going to set to like 1,000, 100, you know, just something like that. But the main thing is that these guys, we would only do it when these are first created, okay? So we would set these only initially to set spin and things like that. And the whole point is just so that way they have a little bit of a kick. And the main thing is the velocity I want to randomize. That's the big thing for me, because I want these to be have a bit of random velocity, just because you won't get that from the wind. The wind doesn't have that randomness. All right, so let's see. All right. So that's looking cool. Now we have stuff being attracted, it's moving up. I gotta check the turbulence, I might need to crank it, but the main thing that's all working. I'm just going to just duplicate the standard force in this again. I'm going to do it just to the other group, which is the VB2, because we want to make sure that that is being affected as well. I'm just trying to think whether there's anything else that I need. I think that's going to be fine. All right. So at this point, we've done a lot. I'm going to do a play blast of this just from the camera viewport, just so we get a better idea of like what's going on. This doesn't have any dynamics or stuff like that set up yet. So let me just realistic. Yeah. So this doesn't have shape collisions or anything set up. All that's going on is that the pieces are being fragmented and everything else based on this laser coming down. The whole thing is set up in a way that it's completely procedural. We can still move the laser wherever we wanted and then recache the prefracture. But all the pieces are going to fly up. We can trigger everything. We can tell when it's going to happen. We have total control over the entire thing, which means that when it comes to doing the other buildings, it's probably going to take 10 minutes to do all the other buildings, because we've set this up in such an intricate way. We can control everything. And that's where the real power comes in, is not being restrained by this approach. I mean, I've supervised projects where if it's a new team of people, I've had technical directors say like, oh yeah, I can't change this, Alan, because it's a simulation. And once you hit the button, you got no control, which is BS. And, you know, either, you know, if that's the fact, then you either don't know what you're doing, or you're trying to bullshit the supervisor. So, you know, it's just something to keep in mind, that like you can have total control. You just got to think ahead. So I'm only playing a few frames here, but this is a good start. We now have pieces of the building ripping apart, and it's growing over time. So I'm just going to trying to select that. I don't have them, that's why I'm trying to select the helper so I can zoom in a little bit. So here we can see that this is kind of like raising up in the air. It's looking kind of cool. It's a good starting point. I have a script here called TP Tuner. If you need to get it, just look at the name, type that into Google, and it'll show up. I like this just because you can change stuff on the fly. It's very easy to kind of adjust a lot of properties. So I just want to stop displaying all this geometry. Like I just want to stop displaying all the particle ticks. Same thing under collisions. Yeah, I just want to not display the particle ticks. So that way I'm just looking at the raw geometry and that's it. It's just a little bit less distracting. Okay, so we've gone through a lot, and I want to speed this up a bit more and do a lot more with it. Before we go any further though, let's start to actually make this more dynamic, because right now it's just particles moving up in the air. They're all dumb particles. So what we can do is we can go and create a new group, and we'll call this SC, and this is because it's going to be a shape collision. Now, I was thinking about using bullet, but I just found like bullet, there's bits exploding, it just wasn't as stable as I'd like. So I'm still going to use the regular SC or shape collision. So I'm just going to get this SC node as a rigid body solver, and I'm going to drop the SC in, and I'm also going to drop in the collisions group, collisions. All right, and we got size as mass. For now, I'm going to keep that on just because I don't really care about setting up individual stuff. And the main thing about this is that it's going to allow us to have all the pieces are going to respect each other, and it means that they're not going to just fly out. They're going to all be pushing and pulling and trying to get out. Now, another advantage of TP Tuner is you can change properties easily for everything. So I just want to change the friction levels on all of these to like 30, because TP has very sticky friction levels and I really dig it, but in this case I want to keep these around 30. So I'm just doing it all on the fly. If you don't have TP Tuner, you don't want TP Tuner, just go in here and you just want to change the properties of each group to be 30. The other thing we want to do is set the voxel grid to 1. I think, I don't know, like for me I like doing that because it's a bit more stable in general. So like, let's see, I'm just going to go through these here. I'm going to set this all to 1. And that way it's using the convex shape. So it's not every group, it's only the shapes that we're using for dynamics. Okay, so I'm going to set these to 1. So the thing is, with SC on, shape collision on, this is going to be considerably slower. Okay, but we're at that point where we've got this pretty awesome workflow set up. And now what's going to happen is it's going to be fully dynamic. We're going to see it all pulling everything apart. So I'm kind of interested to see how it turns out. It is definitely going to take a bit of time to calculate, probably like 15 minutes. I don't know. So let's run this and just check out how it looks. Otherwise, we can do it from a different viewport as well. Okay, and so here we can see the dynamic simulation, everything's being ripped up, and you can see it all kind of pushing and pulling, trying to get out. And this, you know, obviously there's more we need to do, but already we're starting to get this building being ripped apart. I started doing it from the camera view, and I figured the first time we see it, we should probably see it concentrated, like on a perspective viewport, just because the camera kind of whips by too quick. So we might need to play with the timing, a few things like that, but you know, as in like when it starts. But overall, I think this is really cool. Like we've got this, you know, all the ceiling, everything's being ripped apart. I wouldn't mind the braking to happen a bit more aggressively. So we're almost there, almost at the end of this video. I'm gonna go into VB. Let's actually have these start a bit sooner. Rather than have to adjust these all the time, whoops, I might just get activate. I'm just exposing activate on all of these. I'm just going to put in a float value and rename this to activate value. Let's just set this to like 55. So it already starts kind of broken as those pieces come up, and then the rest of it breaks. I think that might just be an easier way to have more of it broken as we go through. So that's the main thing, and also we need to start looking about efficiency, right? So we don't need to be doing shape collisions all the time. So why don't we do this? I'm going to turn off volume breaker and all that stuff for a moment. Why don't we look at building something up where, you know, the main interaction with the shape collision is going to be when it's interacting on the ground level. Once it's in the air, it's probably not really going to be colliding with stuff much. So why don't we do this? I'm going to create 2 more groups. And one of these essentially is just going to be a big bounding box. I just want to create something where we create a big grid, and then as things fly through it, they stop being dynamic. So it's going to not have to calculate them anymore. So we'll just call this, I don't know, dumb B box for bounding box. Okay, whole point is that I'm going to get the beam origin off, and I'm not going to do individuals, I'm just going to do the whole group. And I'm going to get do a 0.3. So I'm going to pull the position. Let me just do this. I'm going to pull the position from here, duplicate this. I'm going to plug in X and Y, but then in Z, I just want to add a bit of math in here. Okay, so I don't have my Wacom. I just put it on the floor, but basically I'm just going to get the position of here. I'm going to add some more in, so it's going to be somewhere down below. So we just get the Z value, and then I'm going to basically just say A plus, and I'm going to put in, I don't know, let's just say negative 100, something like that. Plug it in, and finally, let's just create a point down there. And let's give this a name. I'm trying to think of what I would want to call it. And I still cannot think of anything. I'm just going to call it like bounding box. Dumb B box, I guess. All right, so position is from there. Dumb B box. Pistol shot. 200 lifespan, 350, whatever. Main thing is that it's just going to create a point. All right. Now you can see it's created this point right there. So maybe we don't make it quite as high. So there, you know, like whatever it's going to be, just use your best judgment, get something around there. Main thing is under the position born, I'm also, let me just do it this way, it's probably easier. I'm going to create a standard shape. I'm going to create a size. I'm going to create a scale. Just the standard stuff that I'm always going to throw in. Mainly size, let's just throw 25. Shape is going to be a cube, and the scale, I just want to make it wider in X and Y. Okay, so now when we look at this, we have this giant bounding box above it, and as pieces fly through it, which we'll do in the next part, I don't know, dumb group change, I guess I'm running out of ideas now of what to call this stuff, but the whole point is that as this flies through it, we could say, are you in the mesh? And if you are, then go become dumb. So let's just get those groups set up, because we need to do it here too. I want to keep it in V1, but I'm going to make them dumb here. So we already have similar names. We might as well just copy these guys in here. I guarantee we're not going to use those pillars, but anyway. So B1, I'm going to say D for dumb. But it just means that these are stuff that it's going to be dumb. Let's make these pink, something just really obvious. All right. All right, so the cool thing is that I got this grid here, and I'm just gonna go and get my I don't know, I'm just thinking for a second. I'm just gonna get, I guess I would need a p-pass AB. So let's just do that. Because I would need the dumb shape. Dumb B-box. I guess I should respect the fact that it should have an underscore. B1 dumb B-box. Alright, so we got that, and then pretty much everything that's in the shape collision node, I guess. And I'm just going to do a condition saying if you're in the mesh, and this would be the B-box, the position, and I'm just going to say, actually, I apologize. For now, I'm just going to, we don't need the, individual groups, because at least for now, I don't care that much. I'm just going to throw them all into the dumb group, right? So dumb. I'm just going to drop them all in the dumb group. So make that exposed, turn that on. If we want to do individual ones, we can. I just kind of feel like by the time they're in the air, we're not really that worried about it. I did accidentally put speed on this position born, so, or not remove it, so speed 0, just on the dumb B-box. So just make sure it's not moving, otherwise it'll never catch up. So these particles are going to go through there, and as they go through here, they're going to turn pink because they're not going to be in the shape collision anymore. So let's just put this above the shape collision anyway, but because the ordering does matter. But the whole point is that as these go up, they're going to be taken out of the rigid body sim, which will just make things faster. It's just a good way to kind of keep things as clean as possible. But I feel like now we're at a pretty good spot. There is other things I could do. So, for instance, with the make dumb stuff here, we could do other things as well. We could force it to go dumb instantly. So we could say VB roof, expose the size, and then set that to go into a group as well. So here's the thing, some of these particles might be really tiny and we don't really care about calculating them because you're not really going to see what they're doing. It's only the big shapes that we really care about. So we could, again, tell them to go into that dumb, in this case, roof. And we can do it simply by doing a threshold. We could say if the size is small enough, so like, I don't know, 0 to 1.5, if it's inside of that size, so 1.5, then it goes in the roof. And we can do that for all the stuff breaking. And this would just simply mean that anything that breaks and it creates like small fragments, we could then send that into, we could take it out of being calculated for any rigid body sims as well. So that's like an added bonus that we could do just to kind of speed things up, get faster simulations. Because at this point, now we're starting to get some, heavy duty sims going. This is definitely going to take a while to calculate, and because of that, we want to speed it up wherever we can. But I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to run this one last time, but I think that at this point, it's going to be in a pretty good spot. There's definitely more I would like to do. I wouldn't mind actually activating this a bit sooner. So like beam activation, right now we've got it set to activate at 120. The stuff starts at 70. I don't have the plates up in front of me right now, but basically, I'm doing this off screen. I'm just I'm using MaxScript because I'm lazy, but I'm just trying to get to here quickly so I can load up the plate. But essentially, this starts at frame 70, and then it comes over here. So I kind of feel like I want the beam already turning on around here, like frame 90 probably. Because I already want, like, I want plenty of time to see this because the camera whips by not long after. So why don't we change the timing a little bit? Let's set this to 90, and then the next one can be like 140, something like that. All right, that won't change anything. This is all outside of our cache, so I think we're in a good position. Okay, so rather than running a preview, I thought I would just cache this. So just right-click, cache, and I'm just gonna do the same thing, turn mesh off, just show a bounding box for that. All right, so let's just see whether these turn pink. Okay, so they're turning pink. Awesome. And the cool thing is, at least now, like, because it's cached, I can scrub relatively quick through it all. So I guess I'm just going to quickly turn off the dumb particles. Set that to none. Okay, so this is it so far. It's looking pretty cool. There's definitely more I want to do. I feel it's a little vanilla right now. So let's do one or two minor adjustments, and I think we will be good. So it's definitely flying up aggressively. So that's one thing that I would say. Like, again, with LAS, with the live action series, what we do is reviews. So I would sit down and look at things and say, okay, what do we need to improve on? So right now, these are all blue. So they're definitely fragmenting more, but I feel like they need to fragment a lot more. They're kind of still quite large. So we created this activate thing. I'm gonna also put in, actually I won't, I was gonna expose more parameters, but we'll do this. I'm going to jump in here. I'm gonna set the raster lower to 20, and this to 5,000. I'm gonna do that for all of them. I'll keep them all individual, just in case I ever need to adjust the stuff. 20 and 5,000. All right, and they do activate pretty quickly, so I will bring that back to like 40. Other things are, I'm going to set my friction a lot higher. I think that having some resistance, I think, will work better. So I'm going to set my friction about 65, and then going into collisions, I'm going to set all of these to 100. So they're really, or maybe even higher, like 120. So they're really going to try and make them stick. Other than that, I feel like the grids are growing a bit too quick, so we're making a few adjustments. So one thing is that the radius gets a little bit too big. So what we could do, I'm just going to turn all of these off for now. I'm also going to turn off my cache just so I can turn off the fragging. I just want to get this to be really quick. Okay, so it eventually gets way too big. Okay, so what we can do is we could check what size it is when it gets to, let's see, I'm going to go into the activator, turn on show mesh for a second. I just want to get a clear idea of like how much is too much. I think that that is probably as big as I want it to go. So you go to rad expansion, and I can look at size for this and just say write to debug, and then go to the master dynamic, turn on debug, and when I go one frame, it's going to tell me the size should be 21 or 78. I think it's 78. So what I can do here is turn on and set a threshold, and I can essentially say anything above, I know this is getting messy, anything above like 75, it's going to be on. Okay, otherwise all of this is going to turn off. So it's going to be on 0 to 75. And maybe, actually what I should be doing is, instead of plugging in there, let's plug it into the egg timer, because the egg timer is what's going to expand. So, sorry, I just realized I don't have this exposed. I'm totally making a mistake here. Size, plug the threshold into the size, that's why it's not working. So at least that way we're capping it where it doesn't expand anymore. So it gets to a certain size and then it stops. It doesn't grow anymore. And that just means that we're able to limit this so that way it doesn't, continue to eat up the entire thing. All right, so now I'm just going to go back into the activator, turn show mesh off. But this just means that now when I run this again, it's not going to be able to eat up more than that. I want it to come out a little bit so it does eat up the wall so we can kind of see what it's doing, but I don't want it to go further than that. So I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to run this cache one more time. At the same time, we did play with the fragging. I may need to tweak this a little bit in terms of like how much gets fragged, stuff like that. But all in all, I think this will work out really well. However, I might also just go and play with the cells being generated as well. Now that we're at that point, I did mention this earlier, but we can add a lot more detail in, so that way we're getting a lot more fragmenting going on. So a couple of final things that I want to do here. Let's see. One of them is I might change the cells to, I just bumped up to 750. It's just a little bit more. It's not really going to do much, but it just add a few extra cuts. The other thing, I feel like the expansion is a little bit too quick. I don't mind it expanding for a long time, but I feel like it does a little too quickly. So if we go expansion on the activator, let me just turn these off really quick just so we get fast response. So I just want to see how quickly this goes. Okay, so with the expansion, I might raise this up and we'll just try and get the expansion to happen over a longer period of time. So I think something like, let's say 150 feels pretty good. It's definitely taking time to expand out. And so by the time it gets to the edge, it's it's taking a good considerable amount of time. So I feel like because the expansion is taking longer, it means it's going to continue to break away, because I feel like we hit our cap too soon and like the whole thing just breaks off and flies away. This way things are going to continue to break over time. So that's one more adjustment I want to do. Because I adjusted the cells wherever they are here to 750, I will need to recache this. Okay, so I can do that in a moment. The other thing that I want to do is, I'll turn all of these off, but just while I recache it. But I want to break this more. Okay, I want there to be more pieces. So if I set this to 10 for all these, the raster to 10, that's going to make it break a lot more fine. And I think that's also going to help a lot as well. Because I'm just looking for little things I can tweak that will go a long way in terms of giving me exactly what I want. The final thing is I'm going to play with the friction more. I'm going to set this, we've got like 150, something pretty damn high. But the main thing is going to be the friction here. I'm going to bring up to like 90 and 90. Elasticity I'm going to bring right down so it's less bouncy. And I'm also going to do two more things, and then I think I'll be done. I'm basically at the point now where I'm just doing the final little adjustments that I think are really critical. Okay, so if I were to turn, I think I need to turn these on for it to work, but maybe I don't actually. I'm going to raise the bounding box up a little bit higher, so it needs to go higher before it does this. So if we bring it to about 50, that's going to make it much higher. So these pieces need to raise a lot more in the air. Let's say negative, I don't know, I'm going to say 47. I'm splitting the difference here, but that's just going to put this a lot higher, so it'll go dumb later. That's one thing. There's one more thing I thought about changing, which would be the wind strength. So I'm going to up the turbulence. Actually, I'm going to keep the turbulence fine there. I'm going to up the turbulence on the bigger one to about 1. But mainly the strength of the wind, I'm going to drop to 0.12. So I've made a few adjustments here, but I'm explaining as I go what they're doing. So obviously a little bit more turbulence is going to wave around a little bit more. With the wind strength, it's not going to rise up as quick. Okay, that's pretty critical. Now, fragging more with the VB, we're going to get more pieces, which I think will make them smaller. They'll just look better. And the friction is going to make it kind of interact more, because I feel like they're just kind of, rising up in the air. I want them to interact and pull each other apart. So I think those are really critical. Now, I am going to cache all of this. So we'll do that first. And then I will turn all this on and cache that as well. Okay, we're on the finishing stretch here. I like how this is coming along. I feel like if I was to pause this personally, I feel like there's too many pieces, but that's okay. One thing I don't like, well, two things. Turbulence is a little bit too crazy now. In addition to that, I'd like it to start sooner. So those are the final two tweaks I'm going to do, and I can call it a day on the basics of this building structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get our turbulence and just turn it back a little bit. So I'm going to set this to 0.55 and 0.35. So just something where it's a little bit more toned back. I feel like the speed and everything's good. I'd like it to come out earlier. So there's a few things I'll do there. Before I do, I'm going to quickly look at the VB. I might make it activate less initially, which is a bit of a gamble, but basically what will happen is it'll be larger chunks initially and they will break up more. I don't mind the time frame that they break up in, so I'm okay with that. 120, 65, let's drop it to 55 maybe. All it means is that these will take a little bit longer to break apart, which I wouldn't mind having this slightly larger chunks. It's mainly just because we put so much finer, more refined bits to it now that they break a lot more. So we're doing that. And also timing is the last factor. So with the timing, I guess what we'll do is I'm just going to go into, I guess, the beam shape activator, or yeah, so I'll do it in here. So let's just make it so it starts early, 72, and the next one is same deal, it's like 120. This way it's going to start a little bit sooner. It's partially the friction, it just takes a lot longer to come out. If we look here, it's just starting on this guy, but on this one, it's only really this area here that's visible at 170. So considering it started at 90, it's a good chunk of time for it to actually get out. Other things we could do is TP tuner. I could get the collisions, and I could just bring the friction down on this. So those are the things that will kind of keep it more free. So I'm going to take one more crack now at doing this, and then yeah, I think we'll be in a good spot. Okay, so this isn't the entire shot. I cached it for, I don't know, about 30 minutes. So, I mean, obviously it's getting to a point where now we're getting longer sim times. But it's looking great. So I'm pretty happy with this overall. There's a couple of quick things I'm just going to mention. Basically, I felt like the particles were coming out a little too soon. They broke up, but they became small very, very quickly. So I just simply put a particle age on there, set it to absolute, and this is in the VB. So this way for 25 frames, the volume breaker isn't on. And then after 25 frames, it just, breaks it all apart. And I think that will work really well for this. The other thing is, yeah, so these two I just made 15 because I don't mind the side and everything else breaking a bit sooner, because I don't really want the side to be a large chunk. So I definitely want that to break more. but on the roof, I'd rather them start out a little bit larger at the start. Let me switch viewports. You know, like that. And then after about 25 frames, they'll begin to break apart. Now, we can randomize this a little bit as well. So I could absolute time 1. So I could say time 1, math, random. Make sure you connect it here. What was it? It was 25. So I could say 15 to 30. And that way, like, the values are actually going to randomize. You know, I could do something very similar for these ones as well. It's getting a little bit tight in here. And I'll set this one to 20 and 10. Cool. So anyway, that whole concept is just a neat way that we can just going to randomize when they begin to break apart. And of course, they're going to break over time and everything else too. It's just this way it happens a bit more later on. It's prolonged, so we get larger chunks, and then those chunks begin to break apart. And then we get, like, in fact, I'll play it really quick. So you start out big, and then now they're going to start to break apart, and you just see them kind of all begin to fall apart. So obviously got to recache for the random to kind of take effect, but you know, that's the kind of general idea of what I wanted to do. So I like what we got. You know, obviously there's so much more we got to do, and we got to do it to all the other buildings too, but I'd rather build it up for one building, and then it's just going to be copy paste to all the other buildings because we put in that effort in the beginning. But I'm really looking forward to seeing, like, all of this here, like, really getting pulled apart. It's going to look awesome. So the next step is going to be to create all the secondary effects, to create all the atmospherics. Maybe you'll have some fire and stuff streaming up just for fun. We're going to create like a cool laser beam effect. There's going to be a lot going on. So this is literally just the beginning, but it's definitely been a big process to get to this point, just because we're doing a lot here. I am tempted to also make this kind of like spiral around, so it kind of twists around, but you know, if we do that, I will wait until the next video. I kind of want to give us a break and tackle the next piece. So this is looking really cool. I'm digging it. I will start to wrap things up here. Okay, how'd you go? I hope you found the first lesson to be really exciting, and I hope you got a lot from it. Keep in mind that we're covering a lot of really high-end material here, so don't use that as an excuse to say, well, I'm not at that level yet, but at the same time, understand that if something doesn't click, that you might want to go back and watch the lesson again and continue to do that until it all does click. All of this takes time. Visual effects is not something that you learn in a day. So go through these lessons while you have access to them. We've got 8 lessons. I'm going to keep these lessons live as we go through it, so make the most of this training while you can. That being said, typically I find 60-70% of people drop off after the first lesson. In other words, a lot of people get excited, they commit to the training, they watch the first lesson, and then they find the next shiny thing to move on to and get easily distracted, and then they get frustrated why they are still exactly where they were weeks, months, years from today. So I want you to use this as an opportunity to set goals and commit to this training and go through this free course, make the most of it, and really apply it to yourself. Use this as a chance to create a new visual effects shop for your reel that could land you a job, whatever it might be. I have so many students who've gone on to Industrial Light and Magic, to Weta, to MPC, to Framestore, landed their dream job, started their dream career, all through going through this training and very similar training to this. But it all starts with you making that commitment. So if you want to be one of the majority, because I'll be honest, like, there is a majority of us that start something and we don't see it through. And if you want to be part of the frustrated crowd, you can be one of them, or you can see this through and be one of those who applied yourself and went on to the next level and went on to pursue their dream career and got to actually do this for a living, to get paid to do visual effects. Now, some of you might already be in visual effects, but you're looking to actually get those projects that you really want to work on. You want to work on the next Marvel film or whatever it might be. Like I said, some of the techniques that we're using in this particular lesson are based around some of the work that I've done on Avengers and other big Hollywood films. So you can do the same. You just got to go through the training. I think that's so critical to really hammer this in, because like I said, it's very easy for us to start something. It's a lot more difficult for us to actually see it through and complete it. And I always look at where I want to be a week from today, a month from today. What am I doing right now to make that change? And I've given you this opportunity, but I want you to commit. I want you to see it through. Make the most of this training. Keep an eye out for the next video I'm going to be sending you shortly, and we'll continue to move through the training and build up our destruction, build up our explosions, our pyro, our lighting, compositing, all of the bits and pieces that create a finished live action visual effects shot. Keep an eye out on your email, and I'll see you in the next lesson.